Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday post-Week 18 edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll be talking first-round mock draft. We'll be recapping our futures, over-under props, or bets, I guess, we made that weren't great, Jake. I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Wasn't as successful of a season as we had in the past couple of years, which is fine, given all the quarterback injuries, and really put a bow on overall the 2023-24 fantasy football season. Lots to cover. Our last show of the year, but of course we'll have plenty of playoff conversation, playoff prop bets, stuff like that on this channel. But for you and I, Jake, this is going to be our last show. Let's hit the music right away. Again, welcome everyone to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by Circa Sports. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter. You can follow Jake at RotoJake. For the video audience, you'll notice that we are both at home. We are in the midst of what is expected to be a foot of snow dropping here in the Madison area. So, needless to say, we are grounded. It is.
Can't even get out of my home. I'm just happy the internet's working here.
It's a snow day for the wife and the kids. So if we hear any extracurricular activities in the background, just know I'm trying to survive a toddler life as best I can. So
I got my brother / tenant also working from home here today. So we've all got background risk here, but that's where we're at. And here in 2023, the pandemic allowed us to do these makeshift home studios once in a while. So hopefully you all enjoy our last show. I'm ready to roll with you.
Yeah, and already have people in the chat asking value for next season, which is going to be our primary focus on the Tuesday show, talking first-round mock draft. Somebody was asking if Travis Kelce were to fall into the second round, is that a steal? Well, we'll get to that. We'll see if any tight ends make our first-round mock draft. We are doing this exercise, Jake. We've done it now a number of years with the pretense that we are in a PPR league. It's a typical 12-person league. And I think we're going to see a change relative to what we have in past years as to what position is primarily focused on. I remember we did the show last year and I said, I think Bijan Robinson could be a first-round pick. I might have put him at 10 or 11 at the time. Needless to say, I don't believe there is going to be a rookie that cracks our top 12 overall picks come next August, but we'll see, depending on the draft looks in super flex leagues. Maybe you have the case for Caleb Williams or some of that, but a lot of that dynasty conversation will be happening on this podcast network over the coming weeks. John and Mario in particular are going to be tackling the combine stuff and even pro days, what that all means, how it will shape out. And we're going to have plenty of coverage overall with rookies and dynasty conversation, but you and I are focusing on
I'm sure
next year.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to add in that, at some point over the next couple of weeks or early next year, we'll do a super flex mock draft. But I am just going to say that I'm highly skeptical that any quarterbacks will be taken in our first round mock. And even if we extended into round 2, there would probably be no quarterbacks here, because the people that did maybe reach a little bit for your Josh Allen and Mahomes types this year were definitely hurt, and we're definitely, maybe not advancing so far this year. So I think it's a perfect year for the weight on quarterbacks. I mean, the league winners were your CJ Stroud guys and whatnot. So,
yeah, I think, again, full point PPR league, 12 people across the whole roster. Across the league. We're going to go back and forth on this. So we both had Christian McCaffrey number 1 overall. I think that's going to be the unanimous selection next year, kind of in the same vein of the Priest Holmes, Larry Johnsons, Marshall Falks, and LaDainian Tomlinsons of yesteryears when we first started doing fantasy football. I don't think there is going to be a more unanimous number 1 overall selection in recent memory relative to what CMC will be next season. So I don't know if there's much more to discuss with him. But at number 2,
what about? I mean, I know this isn't a super flex show, but what about super flex? Is he number 1 even in super flex?
No. I think you still take Mahomes, depending on what the Chiefs do this offseason. Mahomes, Allen. I think Jalen Hurts even belongs in there, depending on what your scoring system is. And you can make the case for Burrow coming off of injury, CJ Stroud with what the Texans might do. There's far too many quarterbacks that I think McCaffrey, much like Justin Jefferson this year, would be more like pick 1-8, 1-9, 1-10 in a redraft superflex format.
So I'll probably take him 8 in the fishbowl and he'll get injured or something, right? No, I agree.
I guarantee
McCaffrey,
yeah, exactly.
Number 1 overall. But if I am lucky enough to get into 3, 4, 5 number 1 picks situations, I would consider diversifying a little bit because yes, it was great he stayed healthy this year and that showed his absolute ceiling. But I don't know. There's been injuries in the past, and it'll be something that we want to watch. But overall, the first 3 number 1 picks I get, I'm going McCaffrey.
It's interesting. Last year's number 2, number 3 was CMC. You could make the case for Jamar Chase. Tyreek Hill was in that conversation. Travis Kelce really was the obvious 1 through 4, with Justin Jefferson being number 1.1 for the most part. I think it's similar tiered system, but I'm very curious how you rank some of these top end guys. I made a list of people that I would consider in the first round. It wasn't a be all end all. This is how I'd rank things overall. But I think there was 14 guys that I'd consider among the first 12 picks. And I think you more or less had that. So I'll give you the floor at number 1.2 after McCaffrey was already taken first overall. Who would you be drafting to build your teams?
Yeah, so I'm going to go a little bit of perhaps a surprise pivot here. And I'm going to go with the man who actually outproduced Christian McCaffrey in PPR scoring. The number 1 scorer in PPR, and that man's name is CeeDee Lamb. I'm doing that number 2 now. I know that might not be the consensus when it comes around here, and I'll admit I'm trying to get a little bit spicy here for the purposes of our show and to ignite some conversation. But, really, for me, it was probably between CeeDee Lamb and guys like Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson. But the things I like about CeeDee Lamb is he's entering his age 25 season. That's huge for me as opposed to Tyreek Hill, who's about to enter his age 30 season. CeeDee Lamb has not missed a single game in 4 seasons. And we know who the quarterback's going to be, right? The one thing with Justin Jefferson, and it certainly may not matter, but the one thing with Justin Jefferson is we really don't know who's playing quarterback for the Vikings in 2023. So obviously, if you take this first round mock here and you shift it all the way up to next September or late August, Justin Jefferson could very well take this number 2 spot. But I'm going to go ahead and pencil in CeeDee Lamb at number 2 overall because really the first round pick, unless you took McCaffrey this year, this was the rare one. The first round pick doesn't necessarily win you the league, but it can certainly lose you the league. And CeeDee Lamb, maybe it's a little bit conservative, but he's most likely to not lose you the league.
Yeah, and a user asked in the chat, and I think this is a really good conversation. CeeDee Lamb really didn't start becoming overall league winner CeeDee Lamb until week 5 or 6, and that was in large part Dak Prescott kind of figuring things out. I think the offense overall for the Cowboys didn't know what their identity was. We had heard Mike McCarthy talk about how they wanted to use Tony Pollard even more, the running game just overall. And not that it was abandoned, but I think if you drafted Pollard this year, you were certainly disappointed. Whereas Absolutely. The passing attack and Dak Prescott too, fantastic. So if you were to be slow again to start the year, is he still worth taking at number 1.2, which is kind of what you recommended?
If you got into the playoffs at 8-8, you probably made it to the semifinals or maybe the finals. And if you made it to the finals, I think CeeDee Lamb, had 40 for you?
So, something along those lines, yes.
So, slow start aside. So you could argue that he's had a record-setting season despite a third start, and he is right in the heat of his athletic prime. And for all the coaches that have been getting fired and all the changes and all the quarterback inconsistency, Lamb looks like he's going to have the same coach, coordinator, quarterback, right. In his year. And again, the fact that he hasn't missed a game in 4 seasons, some might say he's due, but I don't necessarily believe that mindset. He seems to be good enough, physical enough and good enough at avoiding the big shots and having a good enough quarterback to not hang him out to dry to be able to, continue to keep up, stay healthy a little bit. Where again, Tyreek Hill might be another one of those that gets considered here, but entering age 30 season has had a couple soft tissue injuries. The speed is speed is often what goes here as you start to get on the tail end or arguably past your prime. Obviously, not saying that about Tyreek Hill yet, but when you compare the two, one has better numbers, one has almost a better offense. One has better offense. The Cowboys' offense was undoubtedly better than the Dolphins last year, even though it was close, a hot start. But yeah, for me, it's CeeDee Lamb, number 2. And I know that it's probably spicy, a little bit controversial. There are certain other outside circumstances that can get me to change my mind by the time August rolls around. But right now, if we're doing best ball drafts, I think CeeDee Lamb is the safest number 2 pick with ceiling just as high as any of the other options.
I actually don't think it's all that spicy or outlandish to say CeeDee Lamb is going to be among the top 3-4 overall picks come next year. given exactly what you said, that there's going to be some familiarity, what we did over the course of this season now, and kind of confirmation the Cowboys offense is legitimate, and theoretically nothing should be changing. Maybe you lose an offensive line piece, but overall, the core of what made CeeDee Lamb the top overall fantasy wide receiver will all come back next year. And it's a certainty in that regard. I'm going with Justin Jefferson at 1.3, and I'm trying not to make the mistake that I made, ironically, when it was Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb's rookie year. My brain is already in dynasty mode, so I'm thinking of this rookie receiver class, and it's obviously Marvin Harrison at 1-1 very clearly, but I love Keon Coleman from FSU. We saw Odunze not do exactly what we're hoping for against Michigan as a Big Ten Badger fans, but he was certainly good. I mean, there's 3 or 4 receivers, and my couched example has been always, you'll take Marvin Harrison 1.1, obviously, if you're looking at non-superflex leagues, but I like all the other receivers equally among those top 3. I don't want to make that same mistake because I did that with Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb. I like Lamb and I like Jeudy. It's 1A and 1B. There was clearly a 1A, and it was Lamb, and Jerry Jeudy hasn't been anywhere near that. I don't want to make that same mistake saying Jefferson, Lamb, and Tyreek Hill are all the same. I think Lamb and Jefferson are absolutely together, and I think Tyreek Hill, and we'll get that a little bit later on, is below that group. So Jefferson to me is 1.3. I am operating, Jake, under the idea that the Vikings know they can be competitive in the NFC, certainly in the NFC North. And whether it's Kirk Cousins, whether it's getting another veteran quarterback, whether it's trading up and getting a high-profile rookie, there's a number of different ways that they can very easily and confidently confirm and improve possibly that position. And we saw Kirk Cousins before he was healthy, likely was going to be one of the better offenses in the league and certainly in the NFC. Jefferson already had some injury concerns, but it didn't feel like it was Christian Watson repetitive type of hamstring deals. It was more fluky circumstance. And we know Jefferson is one of the best receivers in the league. We saw Jordan Addison now emerge as a quality target. And TJ Hawkinson, who knows when he'll be back? She'll have to rely on Jefferson earlier. To me, it's 1.2 or 1.3 after McCaffrey, and you could say Lamb too. Jefferson's an easy call among the top 3 picks.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. No doubt about that. The one thing about his injury that I actually like is it seems like the Vikings did a good job managing it and were overly cautious about it. You know, he missed pretty much the full end of his return timetable there. And when he came back, you know, he looked like he was healthier, at least in week 18. He ended the season on an exclamation point. I believe it was 30 half PPR points. Still not enough to get the 90 I needed in Stake League, but also still very good. So I 100% agree with you. Justin Jefferson is number 3, and he could easily catapult himself up to number 2. You know, with once the quarterback situation is solidified there. So I'm very interested in that and in what the Vikings decide to do. And, you know, even with the uncertainty, he's a top 3 pick in your best ball leagues as well. So moving to number 4, I know I knocked Tyreek Hill a couple of times, but really that was only done to help rationalize my Lamb and Jefferson ranking ahead of Tyreek Hill. But I'm not going to make the same mistake. I think everybody who drafted 5 or below and didn't end up with Tyreek Hill ended up making a huge mistake in draft season this year. And so for that reason, I am going to take him number 4 overall. I mean, just the speed, the development, and what was health of Tua this year, and that overall offense here, I think Tyreek Hill is a game breaker that on his own will win you 4 or 5 weeks during the fantasy season. The volatility of the production, you know, is sometimes a little bit concerning, but and you just got to hope that the rest of your team is good enough in the playoffs to win a title. But Tyreek Hill will play a huge part of getting you there and possibly getting you some points titles as well. So Tyreek was arguably one of the MVPs this season, as we see here. I'm throwing him in at number 4, even though he's entering his age 30 season.
I'm ecstatic that you took Tyreek Hill. I was hoping that would be the case because I actually have Bijan Robinson in my first-round mock ranked ahead of him. And it's because of the news that surfaced yesterday that Arthur Smith had been fired at 12:01 a.m. Eastern time by Arthur Blank, owner of the Falcons. And it means that the Falcons' fantasy hell is finally over, hopefully. Whether it mean Kyle Pitts or Drake London or Bijan Robinson, 3 uber-talented guys, we are going to see a better offensive scenario in year 2 for Bijan Robinson than year 1. And you could make the argument that Bijan Robinson's rookie season was still totally fine. Now, week 18, he gets the 70-yard receiving touchdown, certainly boosts his numbers a little bit, but he was already among the top 12, 14 fantasy running backs overall this season, and that was with bizarre play calling, inconsistent opportunities, and an offense that was severely hampered by Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. I think that quarterback position by default has to get better next year. The Falcons have a premium enough pick where they can improve that too, and Bijan Robinson, by all accounts, lived up to the draft hype that he had coming out of Texas. I feel fully confident if we are drafting running backs earlier, not taking Christian McCaffrey, there is one player that can outperform what his ADP will be entering next season. It's Bijan Robinson.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think the Arthur Smith news, I loved Alan's tweet right away. Ding dong, the witch is dead here. So we're going to find real fast here. If Arthur Smith is indeed the dunce that every fantasy analyst has indeed thought he was. So, we'll see what's going on here with Bijan Robinson. And I like Bijan Robinson. I agree with you. Absolutely. He's a first-round pick. I actually had him ranked a little bit lower than you, though. I have one more running back ranked ahead of it. Bijan is my RB3, and Bijan is number 8 overall on my list. And I guess I'm just going to stick to my list and keep rolling here when it comes to my pick here. At number 6 overall, I am going to roll with Ja'Marr Chase. He was the consensus ADP number 2 last year, and Ja'Marr Chase actually, in my mind, has just as good a chance to finish as wide receiver 1 as Lamb, Jefferson, or Hill. We'll expect Burrow to be back. He's supposed to be throwing by OTAs. If anything, Burrow will finally have the full offseason to get right and get healthy. And Chase produced just fine with Jake Browning at the helm as well. He is, again, wide receiver number 1 material. I don't, there's not much behind him. T. Higgins had a couple good games without Chase, but yeah, I'm all over Chase at, let's see, this will be pick number 6 overall in my draft. I have Chase at number 5 overall in my early 2024 rankings. He's the man, and I don't think that's going to change.
So I'm curious what your answer to this is, and I think I know mine. Let's say T. Higgins is not back for the Bengals next season. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. You could possibly take him, but they're entering a cap situation, especially after paying Burrow what they did, and knowing Chase comes next year, you might have to pick one or the other. And I would say by every account, everyone's taking Ja'Marr Chase in that instance. If T. Higgins is not a Bengals wide receiver next year, and let's assume they don't draft one high in the first round, although it's certainly possible, does that add value to Ja'Marr Chase's fantasy value, or would that make you a little bit more nervous to take him?
I think it's pretty neutral because he's a guy that could get by just on targets. I mean, if he gets the like Keenan Allen type volume, I think he can still succeed and be productive in that. And even if he does, even if they do bring in more competition or draft another rookie, which I could totally see them doing, it doesn't worry me. I mean, Chase is a elite of enough player that he can excel in double coverage. He can excel whether it's based on volume or efficiency, quality targets, and either way, Chase is my man there. It doesn't, whatever happens, Higgins back, Higgins not back, wouldn't change our ranking here with Chase at number 5.
I would be really surprised if Higgins is in a Bengals uniform next season. He's going to be one of the top on the market free agent wide receivers. I don't know if the Bengals really want to go ahead and spend that, but also as I do more research on this upcoming rookie class, I think it's entirely possible the Bengals could draft a guy in the first round and say, kind of like what we were hearing in the conversation with Justin Fields and the Bears, you're resetting the first round rookie clock at your quarterback spot. You're kind of resetting the wide receiver clock as well too now after Devontae Adams and Hill and all those guys got those $30+ million a year contracts. You're saving like 15-20 million if you're taking a receiver at 12 as opposed to paying T. Higgins 24, which I think is probably at most at least is what he'll probably get if he hits the open market. I'm not concerned though. I thought, especially with Jake Browning when he was quarterback, you saw Zach Taylor become a much better play caller than I had even confidence entering the Super Bowl, period. That play caller, that offense, that quarterback can find Ja'Marr Chase any single time and can scheme him open any single way. So yeah, I'm totally fine at 1.6 for Ja'Marr Chase. I would take Amon-Ra St. Brown just a bit higher, though. I would take St. Brown ahead of Ja'Marr Chase, and he marks my 1.7 selection. That Lions offense, again, much like we were saying with CeeDee Lamb, theoretically shouldn't change. The one concern, though, and it became even more apparent now with Mike Vrabel. News today that he's not the Titans head coach this year. Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Lions, is going to get a head coach job somewhere. Whether he'll be successful or not, I don't know. That's not the conversation for today. But he will get an HC job somewhere else. So does the Lions' offense look different? Yeah, it's gotta look different next year. Does that mean St. Brown is going to get utilized to 160 targets like he has the past couple of years? I would imagine yes. Do you think Jameson Williams, given the draft capital invested, becomes more involved? I would hope so, especially after missing a few games off of suspension. And I don't think they move off Jared Goff. They do have Hendon Hooker there. The Lions will, I guess, spoiler for the article it's posted later today, I think they lose in the first round here to the Rams. They won't have a draft capital pick high enough to really dive into the offense, but I think they really have some issues defensively where you're investing draft capital significantly in that spot. So I think St. Brown, even with the Ben Johnson offense coordinator change, will be involved to the extent that he should be in PPR leagues among the first 5, 6, 7 players drafted overall.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The Stafford narrative is a little too juicy to pass up, and I like them this week too. But yeah, so St. Brown is excellent. He's like the perfect safety pick, right? Because he gets such huge volume. He's good enough after the catch to turn some of these slants and out routes, get upfield and get into the end zone. So we don't have to worry about touchdown variance that happens with so many guys based on the red zone targets. And you're right, largely the same, at least head coach and quarterback here we expect for Amon-Ra St. Brown. It was really, really difficult for me to rank between Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown. They were very, very close for me. St. Brown's the floor pick and Chase is the ceiling pick, I guess would be the way that I would describe that. And both of them are perfectly fine at 6-7 in the draft. So I'm definitely all about that.
Can we agree, Jake, real quick, that there's a tier, very linear tier of the first 7. You could say McCaffrey 1-1, obvious. Then you go some combination of Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Lamb, maybe Bijan if you really want a running back among those next ones. Mm-hmm. And then this is it. I think there's a very big drop off once again. This is now 3 consecutive years where I'm like, I would hate picks 1, 8 and later. And I think it's kind of clear once again after this point where it's like I don't feel great about what I'm selecting here.
Yeah, it definitely, of course, just by the nature of things, we get a little bit riskier going here. And I tier it a little bit differently because I've got McCaffrey on a tier of his own, and then I have Bijan if we're doing running backs. I have Bijan right there with Jonathan Taylor. Even Jonathan Taylor might even be above him on my rankings. I think I might be a little bit more likely to get back into the Jonathan Taylor game over Bijan. At least if I get a lot of these picks, I'm going to split up that exposure. I actually had Jonathan Taylor number 6 overall on my list ahead of both Amon-Ra and Bijan. I just think that Jonathan Taylor is an elite talent. And I know he had a lot of tread on his tires in college and early on in his career. But he missed time due to injury this year. But the injuries he missed time to this year aren't super concerning. They have his contract situation sorted out here. Anthony Richardson will be back, which you could maybe argue takes away some of the inside the 5 upside.
It adds more value, actually, from a rushing perspective. Absolutely adds more value to JT.
Yes, So I started with the devil's advocate side of that argument, in which Richardson, they're not the Eagles, and it's not like how Jalen Hurts takes away the value of the running backs considerably here. This is the Colts, and I think what's good for the goose, good for the gander, however you want to put it. Anthony Richardson being back, he looked like such a solid player before he went down due to injury in his rookie season. He had a good chunk of experience and then a good chunk of time to watch and practice and, get the timeline, get the feel of the NFL. I think Anthony Richardson will probably be comeback player of the year next year, unless Rodgers goes out and balls out. But Anthony Richardson, I think highly of him, and I think highly of the Colts and what they're able to do. They almost made the playoffs with Gardner Minshew this year. I think they'll be back in the playoffs next season here. And just the fact that you need to have a spy or your defensive end needs to keep a very close eye on Anthony Richardson means that Jonathan Taylor is going to get even more, big holes, big lanes, big running opportunities. And Jonathan Taylor, you saw it even in week 18. Now, Mario was highlighting it on Twitter. He needs one look, one cut, one move, all in one sequence that happens, and he is off to the house. So skill-wise, among running backs. I still think Jonathan Taylor is absolutely elite. Obviously, when we start to talk into dynasty things, maybe Jonathan Taylor has 2 or 3 of these seasons left. But next year, on what I believe will be fresh legs too. I mean, the time that he missed due to non-serious or long-term injuries, if anything, gave him some rest and no playoffs to worry about too. He'll be out there on fresh legs, and I would argue he is right up there in the same tier as Bijan. I might have taken him 5 or 6, but I love him. I love to get him down at 8 in this situation. You mentioned, you don't want to be 1.8 and below. If you got just Jonathan Taylor at 8, I would be totally fine with that.
You're right. And this was the next call for me. I thought it was a very obvious one of my list. I would go Jonathan Taylor. You have painted me in a corner, and I guess I'm going to come with what I think is a hot take, but maybe you could tell me I'm incorrect in this. I'm going to have Breece Hall at 1.9. I think he's an obvious first-round pick with the way I'm projecting things. I'm assuming Aaron Rodgers will come back while he's not full of mind. He will be fully healthy. Garrett Wilson, obviously a great receiver. We know the Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb stuff. It feels like the Jetsiest thing to do for them to draft a first-round rookie receiver with their high pick as opposed to getting an offensive lineman. You will have an ability to sign offensive linemen. I would assume the Jets will also pick up David Bakhtiari if when he's cut by the Packers. They will improve the offensive line by other means. Whether it be successful is a different conversation and will likely be the reason why the GM and head coach will be there following next season or not. But Breece Hall is a certified stud, whether he's a pass catcher or as a runner. And I understand the offense over the past 4 weeks has been exclusively Breece Hall because the QBs have been so poor. But you're going to find scenarios with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback that the offense just moves the ball far more effectively. And while he might not get a per-touch basis like we saw in the last month and a half of the season, he will be far more efficient with those touches. And oh, by the way, he was already running back 1 in the last month and a half. I think Breece Hall with Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback, even though we saw 4 plays overall with Aaron Rodgers as the QB for the New York Jets, that offense is going to be electric so long as Rodgers is healthy, and Breece Hall is going to be the biggest beneficiary for me.
And even if it doesn't work out with Rodgers, there's nowhere to go up from here, right? There's nowhere to go but up for this offense.
Right. Yeah, true.
Even if Rodgers has a down year with half his production he had in his worst year with the Packers, that's still far better than the quarterback play that they got this year, right? And despite all of this turmoil, Breece Hall still managed to have a relatively successful fantasy season. Every time he has been healthy, he has absolutely torn it up. His rookie year, he looked absolutely outstanding before injury. He looked great all season long once, after those first couple weeks when they kind of let him loose. So Breece Hall, I actually had 11 on my list, and he is RB4 for me as well, right behind McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor and Bijan Robinson. So we're definitely in agreement that Breece Hall is your next pick off the board here.
If you want to go running back, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to go running back here. And now we kind of get into an interesting situation here. I think I'm going to – so, again, all these picks from 8 to 12 are going to be very, very debatable, a little bit based on personal preference, that kind of thing. But I'm just going to stick to the rankings I put out. I jotted down here before the show, and I'm going to go back to the A.J. Brown train from Philadelphia. To me, yes, he really kind of let fantasy managers down in the playoffs and towards the end of the year, as did the entire Eagles team, right? The Eagles blew up. I mean, this is one of the teams we'll get to in a bit where we both had overs on the Eagles, and it was going to look great, with 4 weeks left. And then, guess what? They don't win another game. So that was rough here. But the Eagles, of course, are free falling going into the playoffs here. Maybe they have a chance to right the ship. I know A.J. Brown has been a little bit dramatic there at times with Hurts, but, you're a wide receiver. That's your job, right, to be a diva. So the Eagles' offense is far better when they are getting A.J. Brown, very high volume. He is capable of gigantic week-winning games. He is a big physical target that is a tough man to bring down in the open field with plenty of speed, good route running, good hands. I think Hurts and A.J. Brown figure it out this offseason, get it back together, and make him worthy of that number 1 pick. Now, there's a handful of receivers you can argue are on the same tier, but I'm going to go back to A.J. Brown in this scenario.
I was going to take A.J. Brown if you didn't. So he made our top 12, but it's towards the end. And my question to you, or I guess overall, is A.J. Brown going to be the CeeDee Lamb of this year, who is getting taken, 1.9, 1.10, Or is he going to be the Devontae Adams of this year, who was also a back end of the first round selection for a lot of folks? And if you had Devontae Adams and you made it to the fantasy playoffs, he probably won you the league. I mean, there was instances over the last 2 or 3 weeks where he was dynamic along the same caliber of Amari Cooper in terms of overall.
It was the quarterfinals he had a rough game, but the semis and the finals he was A-okay for it.
Yeah, but I tend to agree. We had somebody in the chat say it's going to be more on the Devontae Adams side. The Eagles offense, I'm trying not to be a prisoner of the moment, but it's really hard to when you've lost 5 of the last 6 games and you're entering as a Super Bowl favorite, just coming off of one bad call from likely winning the Super Bowl against the Mahomes Chiefs. There's real things wrong in Philadelphia. I don't know if it's Jalen Hurts. I don't know if Jason Kelce comes back. How does that affect the offensive line? I don't know if you can have just Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert have such a 3-horned funnel and have an offense continue to be successful. There's a lot of those questions that it makes me really anxious. And I don't know if we're going to get the answer against Tampa Bay come Monday. I don't know if you get the answer if they were to beat the Buccaneers in round 2. Like, I think it's sooner to say you're saying it's on a downward slope, a downward trend offensively. So while A.J. Brown is one of the best receivers in the league, I feel very confident saying that. A red zone threat through and through. Jalen Hurts is still one of the better deep ball throwers in the league. That 30-yard lofting throw to A.J. Brown will be forever one of the more dangerous plays so long as both those guys are together. But there's not a volume. There is a volume concern relative to any other receiver, I think, in the same conversation. And that's why he is a late first-round pick and not somebody to consider higher. So I'm with you. A.J. Brown would have been my pick. At 11 and 12, it's really tough. I'm going to go Saquon Barkley, and I'm assuming that the Giants offense will either have a solution if and when Daniel Jones were to struggle / get hurt, or will have an idea of let's build around Saquon Barkley and the pass catchers and anything else. I think he's coming back. I would assume the Giants, given how bad they have been this season, do not want to lose their franchise. And I know despite Daniel Jones' $40 million contract, Saquon Barkley is the franchise and has been for a little while. He has been so productive when healthy. It's just the one healthy issue. I'm slightly concerned we could see a Nick Chubb scenario. I mean, we know Saquon Barkley is brittle. He had some injury issues this season, as he has many other ones. But when he's healthy, Saquon Barkley is still one of the best running backs in the league. And it's more so that I just don't know if there's an obvious next 2 picks. I have some guys I like, and maybe that changes after the offseason. But for right now, Saquon Barkley should still be a first-round pick.
Mm-hmm. See, I think this is the first time that we're going to divert and disagree on this. I actually have 2 more running backs ranked ahead of Saquon here. You have another year older for Saquon. You have the injury history here. You have the fact that even if Daniel Jones is healthy, how much does that actually help this team? This is what do we have here? His 7th NFL season, which is getting up there for a running back. We're not going to lie here, especially with the injury history and the overall struggles on offense, even though this is a bad offense that can still be productive by finding creative ways to get Saquon the ball. Like I said, I have 2 running backs that I would actually take above Saquon in this situation. We can talk about that when we finish the first round, but I actually have to go one guy that I have even higher than these 2 running backs left, and that is our waiver wire MVP, Puka Nacua, at number 12 overall. We're going to Puka.
So no Cooper Kupp. It's Puka Nacua that ends up being a first-round selection in your mind.
Yep, I think I love Cooper Kupp. He's a fine late second, early third-round pick in my mind, and if that means I don't get any of them this year, so be it. But he's had injury history as well here, and we have a full-on changing of the guard. Even when Kupp was back, Nacua was wide receiver 1 there, and I expect Stafford to be back and healthy. Nacua had a record-setting rookie year. He's only going to build on that and continue to grow. Kupp being around even for a handful of games, I think that really helps the situation here. But yeah, Puka's number 12 for me. That's a little bit safer than some of the running backs who can get banged up, and a couple of the wide receivers that also seem to have had some question marks.
Can I guess the 2 running backs that you would take over Saquon Barkley right now? I'm going to guess.
Sure, go ahead.
I believe one is Kyren Williams. The chat mentioned it as well, too, and I'll talk about Kyren Williams in a second. Is the other, at least for me, the other would be Nick Chubb, but I'm curious if Nick Chubb is your second running back.
So the answer is actually neither.
Really? Well, this is actually more. Okay, so who are the two you're taking?
So Nick Chubb has had too many knee injuries for me to throw first round value on him. Okay. If we get him out on the practice field and maybe even a preseason snap or two, and he looks all right, then we'll think about it. That is some serious knee reconstruction for the multiple times. And I believe he's had problems with both knees now. It's bad. Either it's both knees or just
it happened in week 1 though. Like if there's one injury that you could theoretically have a full season to recover from, it would be this scenario, right? We saw Adrian Peterson do it a while ago. I don't think Nick Chubb is Adrian Peterson genetics wise, but this isn't like 1980 anymore, Peterson. Right?
Yeah. Genetics wise. The other thing is, let's see here. So yeah, Chubb entering his age 28 season. We'll see about that. Maybe he'll get into my mid-second round here. But I didn't have Chubb, and I didn't have Kyren Williams either. I know Kyren Williams did a whole lot for me. I think, and he made the most of his opportunity. And he's starting to turn me on the fact that maybe he's actually a good player. Maybe he's actually improved. And but Kyren Williams in any other roster or system, I'm not entirely sure that Kyren Williams isn't just a guy necessarily. And I know that that's insulting given how amazing he was and the money he won. I should donate to his charities just for saying that, right? But I think that there are a lot of running backs given the opportunity that Kyren Williams had that could have matched his production here. Now, obviously, Kyren Williams is a Ram and he is there fine, but and he'll be a second-round pick for me. Maybe some people will go a little over the top. I had 2 running backs actually check in ahead of Barkley and Williams and who's the other guy? Chubb that we discussed here. Yeah, so we're gonna get weird. You can tell me why I'm wrong here. I had Jahmyr Gibbs ranked number 12 overall. I would take him at the 1-2 turn. I love again. Maybe there's some offensive coordinator uncertainty there, but this year is rookie year. Gibbs wasn't fully used to his full extent. Maybe we had a little Arthur Smith syndrome. Maybe we had the fact that they paid David Montgomery a good chunk of money, and that Montgomery gets a lot of the goal line yards. But I think, and I was out on Gibbs largely this season for many of those reasons, right? I think as a second-year player with a full NFL season under his belt, I believe that he'll be utilized more. He'll get more touches. Might even get some red zone work. David Montgomery has been banged up on and off here. He did a short IR stint this season. So Jahmyr Gibbs is. He reminds me of Bijan Robinson. You look at him in the open field, right? The Lions,
they're way different players, but I know
way different players. Okay. But like they as far as getting a screen and taking it to the house, both of them are equally capable of that on any given day. And obviously, that's a huge, huge for fantasy. Gibbs is going to be one of my guys next year. I can see, and that's why. I think part of it's bias because he burned me every single time I played him. And then every single time I didn't play him. So I watched these games and would watch him go off and like, okay, I'm not going to completely skip exposure to him next year. So Gibbs is another one. And then give me who I had 13th overall on my list. I had Travis Etienne.
Okay. That one I understand. Yeah.
Etienne he is the back here. Tank Bigsby clearly wasn't a factor. Trevor Lawrence will be healthier. The Jaguars will be slightly better. Etienne showed me he can stay healthy for 16 games this season. And again, they don't have to worry about the playoffs here to have any extra tread on those tires. So give me Travis Etienne and Gibbs above Saquon. Saquon is fine. I'm okay being a year too early to exit him as opposed to being 1 year too late grabbing him. So that's kind of where I ranked up.
It's like the Dalvin Cook scenario, even when he was with the Vikings, but certainly last year with the Jets, he was being drafted in the second round and a little bit too old, you're a little bit concerned, and still produced, just like Saquon Barkley still produced, but you could clearly tell it's not the same guy from a couple of seasons ago. I still think Saquon Barkley, even if it's like 80% version of Saquon, is easily one of the best running backs in the league. But there is actually a lot that I wanted to pick apart here, and let's give it like 5 minutes. So the Puka Nacua thing, we'll come back to that because I actually have a few receivers that I would take ahead of Puka Nacua and does not belong in the first round in my mind. If you said today Kyren Williams comes back, the Rams do not draft or sign a running back, then yes, Obviously, he's a first-round pick. I think Kyren Williams jumps above Saquon Barkley in my mind. He would be in the same tier of Jonathan Taylor, who we had at 1.7, 1.8 in that range. I just think with a full complement of draft picks, we talked about last week, the Rams, and being a very attractive free agent market, will certainly sign, let's just say, a Joe Mixon or somebody if he got cut by the Bengals. They're going to add at the position. They always go for star guys who will warrant a certain workload, even if Kyren Williams was great in what he did this season. So I'm saying Kyren's not a first-round pick next year because I think the Rams dramatically change things next year. I don't mind ETN. I would take ETN if we felt good about the offensive changes that Jacksonville Jaguars will make, whether it's Doug Peterson getting fired, whether it's Prez Taylor, the offensive coordinator, getting fired. Somebody has to take the
I would argue that those guys sticking around would be better.
No. If they stick around, I mean, this is because I'm a disciple of Mario Puig, but you listen to their Thursday podcast, and I do the Friday show with them on SiriusXM Radio. If Prez Taylor and Doug Peterson are the 1-2 combo calling plays, that offense will not win more than 6 games next year. They were figured out halfway through the year, and I think they were a complete detriment to ETN. I don't think because they drafted take Bigsby early on, they'll invest another early draft pick at running back. So if it's new offensive regime and ETN more or less getting a 85% workload, what he did this season, great. That would be best case scenario. I just don't have the capacity to project best case scenario for Jacksonville anymore. I don't feel comfortable that occurs. So that's why I won't Saquon Barkley. Somebody in the chat had mentioned Achane. And if you were to say Raheem Mostert doesn't come back, which I think he's either on the end of his 2-year deal or could easily be cut, obviously a year older, fine. Achane cannot handle a starting caliber running back workload. And that's one of those that if someone was like, oh, it's Achane's going to be the Tony Pollard this year, be like, yep, he will. Completely disappointing. Do not draft among the first 24 picks. That's a mistake, no matter the high-end games that occur. So I get it. The Jahmyr Gibbs thing, though, that's really interesting because Ben Johnson's gone. I guarantee you he's gone. Do you find an offensive coordinator that gets both David Montgomery and Gibbs involved? I think, yes, you have to, given the draft capital invested and the $6 million a year contract signed to Montgomery last year. Will they be as effective getting both those guys involved? Regardless of if you want to have them both involved, will they be effective? That's really tricky. That's really, really difficult scenario. I don't know if you can guarantee that's happening. Gibbs is the far better player. I'm not saying he's not. But the Lions, with DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, clear as day, Swift is better, still had a utilized role. And I think it's Dan Campbell's philosophy. So I don't think you can easily say Gibbs will be a 1,200-yard runner and 300-yard receiver. He might be the better player. He should get those opportunities, but Dan Campbell, for whatever the reason, hasn't been that primary focus. This season, Jahmyr Gibbs, 945 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, 5.2 yards per carry. Those are great numbers. But it's the same conversation we had with Tony Pollard last season where, once Zeke is gone, he'll go insane. I don't think it works that way in today's NFL, not the way the Lions want to do things. I'm not confident Gibbs is a late first-round pick in my mind.
I look at it and I see, look at what he did as a rookie. Even if things shake up, like there'll be room to grow.
Yeah, I mean, that's the optimistic way of things. I think Ben Johnson leaving, though, changes that whole outcome. And again, he has to leave with all the head coaches that are changing and should be changing over the next week or so. Real quick, you have Puka Nacua as your last pick in the first round. That's fine. Mm-hmm. I would have personally rather had Chris Olave. I think he is a bona fide number one receiver. Don't talk to me about Michael Thomas. You were in on him at the beginning of this year. I think we can officially say the Michael Thomas thing is done. The Saints probably can't draft another receiver. I like A.T. Perry to a certain point, but you're going to have Chris Olave be the number one guy in an offense that Derek Carr's bad, right, or not very good, but they're going to get the ball to Chris Olave. And exactly. I also think whether it's Justin Fields or Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, I would have over Puka Nacua because you are going to have a better offensive coordinator, whatever the Bears have done this year, who will get DJ Moore the ball more often.
See, the DJ Moore thing is what I disagree with severely. I didn't even have him in my top 18 overall. I think, sure, you have a better offensive coordinator. It's still a new offensive coordinator, and it might be Caleb Williams at quarterback. We don't necessarily know. So there's some uncertainty. Would Caleb Williams be better than Justin Fields for DJ Moore?
I feel equally confident that whatever you got from Moore this year with a better offensive coordinator happens with Caleb Williams or Fields, either one.
Yeah, so anyway, so just to go through the rest of my rankings, after Gibbs and ETN, I had Deebo Samuel at 14, just above Olave. I think that he is amazing, and he is a league winner. He can be a league winner when you get to outside of this top 15. So I had 14. So here are all the receivers I had above DJ Moore. I had Deebo Samuel, Chris Olave, and then I still put Stephon Diggs over the top. I know when they changed offensive coordinators and went to a more run-heavy approach, Diggs' production completely fell off a cliff. I think with the whole offseason to figure it out and possibly have a new coordinator, the Bills are better when they're using Diggs to his full potential. So I had him ahead of DJ Moore. And one other one that was really, really tight, I had Garrett Wilson ahead of DJ Moore. But this is where
somebody in the chat mentioned him too.
And debatable here because Garrett Wilson, of course, he let a lot of people down with the Jets. But if we're playing that same logic that we did with Breece Hall and Aaron Rodgers coming back and making that offense collectively better, we know now. Unless they somehow finagle a way to get Devontae Adams or whatever, which that seems unlikely, but you never know what strings Rodgers is able to pull. As long as they go in with Garrett Wilson as their number one receiver, and there's no reason to think that they won't. Rodgers likes to dial in on his guy, and Garrett Wilson will be his guy, and could absolutely. As far as guys outside the top 15. I don't necessarily think Diggs could finish as wide receiver one. We're getting him because of steady week-to-week production. I think Garrett Wilson, with the right set of circumstances, could actually finish as a league-winning wide receiver one type. So that's interesting.
And I guess, again, I was the Bijan Robinson goes in the first round last year guy before he was even drafted. Marvin Harrison won't be a first-round receiver. I don't think it's possible.
Nope.
But we had Justin Jefferson his rookie year. We talked about it on the Waiver Wire podcast because Mike Zimmer was dumb and was not playing him for a certain amount of period and was cut in a few spots. A receiver as talented and gifted as Marvin Harrison can make things work even if you were to go to the Panthers. Or I'm just saying whatever the worst situation is imaginable. We've had scenarios where Drake London and Amari Cooper were wide receiver ones on fantasy teams despite awful quarterback play and awful coaching. Marvin Harrison Jr. will be a receiver that I think you draft in the first 32 picks and will return fantasy value equal or better to that. I feel very confident right now, today, January 9th, even without knowing where he's going to go or what offensive system will be. So just real quick with that mention too.
I 100% believe that Marvin Harrison will be the highest drafted fantasy rookie wide receiver of all time. His ADP will probably be in the late second, early third round. I'm just going to be out on that. I'm okay taking the L, but that's a little too high. I am taking guys like Diggs and Garrett Wilson, guys that I know are out there before. DJ Moore, that line gets interesting. Maybe it's just some Bears adverse, but I did have some Lions ranked pretty high. So we'll see here. The last thing to talk about in the first round is what about Sam Laporta? Obviously, Kelsey's been a first-round pick for ages. We didn't take any Kelsey or any tight ends in the first round here. And we talked –
no Darren Wallers?
We mocked the second, but we talked about the first half, three-quarters of the second round, and Laporta's name hasn't came up yet. I put him at 16 on my list. I do want to see what happens with the injuries here, with the knee injuries, how he looks in the playoffs, if he's given proper time to recover here for that. But Sam Laporta to me is undoubtedly tight end one. I think he makes it'll be midway through the second round for me, somewhere in the 16 to 20 range here. Is that a little too high for him, or do you think that's about spot on?
No, I think that's about right. And you could throw Mark Andrews in there. I wouldn't go that high for Trey McBride, but he'll be a popular candidate in the same vein as Darren Waller or David Njoku or
how far does Kelsey fall? Does he fall out of the second round?
I don't think he plays next year. I really think he's going to retire. But if you're saying Kelsey comes back, he would also be – I think he goes behind Mark Andrews and whatever other young tight end you want, whether someone gets talking to Kyle Pitts again or somebody like that. They'll I think Kelsey becomes tight end 4 with Laporta, Mark Andrews, and then tight end du jour.
I agree with you. There's a non-zero chance that he just doesn't play at all. And that is certainly scary if you are doing best balls already. I know best balls are open, and best balls are going to be the big thing right after the Super Bowl. We'd hopefully know by then, but that is certainly scary enough, to keep because, if you use a second round pick on him in February and he retires, you're toast. You're completely toast. So I'm not taking him, above. I'm not taking him before the third round, and I'm not doing that until at least August, and we have a good idea that he's playing. So, for your best ball drafters and whatnot, that means I'm out on him, so be it. Because even if he does play, the trajectory he was on this year was not necessarily great. So I think he's just got too much going on outside of football, which good for him. He's won league titles for me. He's helped me get free steaks. I love Travis Kelce. I love everything he has done for me in the fantasy realm over the last bunch of seasons. But yeah, it's going to be his time here pretty soon.
Hey, for one final time this season, Jake, get ready for the big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sundays in Vegas, of course, this year. You can watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Get the massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects that will occur all throughout the game. Staying the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory, featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. And don't miss these legendary viewing experiences February 11th, the big game viewing parties, only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. All right, I had talked about at the beginning of the show, and it's worth mentioning real quick. We had success with our futures in past seasons. Not so much this year. My overall record was a brutal 12-20. I didn't realize I did this bad, which is really sad. You weren't much better, 14-8. Mm-hmm. It was a tough year for us from
yes.
betting.
So
and I think
most people rationalize this, right? We pick every game for the fun of doing it. But in real life, with your sports bettor, and we said this several times during the show, in real life, if you're a sports bettor, you're not betting every single of these 32 just to bet them, right? You're picking the ones that you're most confident in, right? And every year we highlight we highlight at least 3 best bets. And the best bets that we offered were at least profitable, right? So this admittedly, yeah, maybe we got a little lucky the last couple of years going above 500, betting everything. And again, we bet everything because it's the point of the show and that's what we do. But in real life, the only bets that I was going to actually make were the Jets under, the Broncos under, and the Chargers over. Unfortunately, the Chargers over, I misread that significantly. I still believe that Justin Herbert is and can be great, but I underestimated how much the poor coaching staff's effect and the complete lack of defense would help him. But in any case, I took an L on that. The Broncos under was a yes. That needed till the very last game of the season to make sure here.
Yeah.
So that was closer than we thought. And then my Jets under, whether it was Rodgers or whether not, you could argue I got a little lucky there. But 2-1 on best bets, 14-18 overall. You also were above 500 on your best bets. So the ones that you were most confident in, which I think is what truly matters for the point and the purpose of the show, the ones you were most confident in, you were able to hit.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos and Bears ones, we had to sweat out their unders here in the last games of the season. I had no idea that C.J. Stroud would be this good. I had liked C.J. Stroud more than Bryce Young. I wish I was more adamant about it because that was not a popular opinion at the time. And now everyone who was saying, oh, yeah, Bryce Young, totally worth number one overall. C.J. Stroud's pretty good, but, Ohio State quarterbacks, those guys are gone. I mean, you don't hear of them anymore. It's like that was erased from the history books, but that was not a foregone conclusion entering July and August. Certainly, I didn't envision, even being a C.J. Stroud guy, the Texans having this kind of success. And really kudos to DeMeco Ryans. I loved Nico Collins, but didn't think he would emerge like that. And the defense just looking far better than the sum of their parts. Credit to the Texans overall. Panthers under was correct as well. But another one that I had been talking about on a lot of other platforms was Saints making the playoffs, and that didn't occur either. I thought Derek Carr was just going to make that offense slightly better, and it didn't. I liked Chris Olave among my first-round receivers next year. If Derek Carr were to be released, I don't think he really can be, but if he were, it wouldn't surprise me because that was a failure of an experiment, whether it's Dennis Allen getting fired or a dramatic change elsewhere with New Orleans. I expected that team to be better. I thought the defense would be better and offense better, and everyone stunk. It was like the NFC South poison just seeped into New Orleans and sucked up everything else too. So I was wrong about the Saints calling that one. And overall, I do the Tuesday betting article where I picked every game against the spread. I think I finished 56%. I got the individual games correct most times throughout the given week, but our over-unders never really quite there. And in large part due to all the injuries that happened at quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You called this the year of the backup quarterback, right? And so it was a tough year for futures to predict. Obviously, the luck can go one way or another there. But I mean, just a couple notes. We both had the over on the Eagles, who epically collapsed. I think they only needed one more win to hit their mark. And, that would have made our records look a little bit better. We both had the over on the Vikings. They only needed 2 more wins to get there. I'm sure if they had Kirk Cousins, they would have gotten 2 more wins, than they did. So, so that's very interesting. Of course, we both had the under on the Browns, who exceeded that expectation despite 4 starting quarterbacks. And again, we both missed the Saints by 1 win. So those were just some highlights of how we got here. So clearly if the pendulum tips in the other direction on one of those, we're looking a lot better. But once again, I can't stress enough is the theme is that you don't have to bet every single game. We do that for the purposes of the show, but you stick to the ones you're most confident in. And I think every single year our best bets have been above 500. So that'll be something to focus on when we do this next year, which will be, we'll undoubtedly be doing a win total over under here towards the end as we're looking for material in August.
I think confidently we're going to see close to a fourth of the league's head coaches either change or an offensive defensive scheme shift enough where you might as well count it among the changes at HC. And it's because of that I don't really feel like there's an obvious, what do we do from here? What's a takeaway? Because with such dramatic change and hopefully better coaching that, other than the referees impacting so many games, which we talked about in past podcasts, I thought the coaching this season was as bad as we've seen in a number of years. And I don't know if it's because I was naive in my youth watching coaching and football overall, or just being more knowledgeable now about how the game is played and what I think it takes to be successful. But either way, I'm hoping better coaching, all the retread guys and retread ideas kind of going to the ether next season will make the NFL season a better experience overall. That's my biggest takeaway and hope.
We talk a lot about how there are only 15 really good quarterbacks in the league, 15 quarterbacks that you're confident in and week out. And, the back half leaves a lot of bad quarterback play in prime time, which, we had a nice rant on earlier this year. Easily the same thing could be said about head coaches. There are only maybe 15 really, really good head coaches, and then the other half of the league is going to keep rotating until they try to find one that is able to rise above that line of mediocrity. And we're going to have to carefully evaluate that next season and see where that goes.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for us. The final edition of the Tuesday RotoWire podcast, of course, brought to you by Circa Sports. Again, I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me on Twitter at JB Fantasy Sports. You can follow Jake at RotoJake. You can yell at us for the bad waiver wire pickups. You can say thank you as well too. That was great a couple of weeks ago as well. But we'll be around. You got a lot of college basketball stuff going on over the next couple of months now. It's a big time for you specifically.
Exactly. I wanted to quick run through a couple of just RotoWire related plugs here. Obviously, with football winding down and baseball draft season getting going here, we've got the full RotoWire MLB draft kit up on the site here, projections, news, outlooks, the iOS app if you kind of want the light version, just the drafting only tool that gets a lot of those features anyway. The baseball content, Clay, James, and the whole crew do a hell of a job season in and season out. There's been a lot of off-season baseball news, so you definitely got to catch up on that. So check that out on RotoWire. Like you said, thanks for the shout out. Myself personally, RotoWire.com/cbasketball will get you to the front page here. Even if you're not going to pay, I've got a DraftKings, a Prize Pick, and a Best Bets article just for college basketball up on the site today that are all free. And if you did want to, jump to the pay tier, look at the bottom there, RotoWire.com/pod, get you 48 hours. There's a legitimate prize pool in DraftKings college basketball tonight, and we have an optimizer and all the other tools just like we would for the other stuff. And then, of course, back on the MMA grind this week here. We got Fight Night this weekend, a pay-per-view next weekend. Some massive cards ahead. UFC 300 in a couple of months here. So definitely we're staying active all over the place on RotoWire. Catch me through March Madness. Catch me through the big UFC events, at RotoJake. Like you see at the bottom there. And thanks again for listening all season. I hope we were able to help you guys and that, we were able to bring back some titles and that we'll have a lot of you back next year. The viewership was up. Thank you to everyone that came and joined us in the chats. I know Tuesday afternoon, we need to get the show out for the commute home for the waiver wire folks here. Right. There's still a lot of you that come out and join us and participate with us in the chat. And we are very grateful for that and for everyone that has tuned in all season. So we appreciate it. Good luck with your best ball drafts, and we'll be back with you next summer.
All right, that does it for us again. Thank you everyone for listening, and hopefully stay safe, obviously with the weather going on. And if your favorite teams like our Packers are in the playoffs, best of luck to them, unless you are facing our Packers, in which case, Mike McCarthy, you are going down. And we'll be talking about the Packers Super Bowl champions in 2024. Kidding, of course. Thanks, everyone.